Hey there Emperors, and welcome back to Azir School, the series dedicated to teaching you the basics of Azir. In week 9 we'll be examining the Sole Invictus Azir guide by Fenderman. Fenderman is a former rank 1 Azir player, and while he's decent, he's a very passive player and a bit of a stat farmer. But let's jump right into the guide. The first thing we see is the fact that he takes Exhaust. This means he's playing passively in lane, but not as passively as if you were to take Heal or Barrier. I personally take Ignite because I'm a much more aggressive early game player. Fenderman says Azir is very weak early game, which is why he runs this build coupled with Exhaust. If we take a look at his rune page, we see that he runs a very odd page in the form of cooldown reduction quints. By taking these CDR per level quints, you reach 20% CDR if you take the 3 scaling CDR blues away and replace them with MR, as he does here. Now the reason this is wrong is because the amount of CDR you are trading for the amount of AP you are throwing away destroys your early game. There's no wonder he thinks Azir's early game sucks when he's taking a rune page like this. The AP from quints is very important to poke early game with Azir. By removing one CDR quint, you go down to 15% at 18, meaning you can't get 45%, but we don't take the CDR mastery in our build anyway because Fervor is much better than Thunderlords right now. It's much better to take the early game power of flat AP and land at 15% CDR at level 18 than to throw it away for 5% more CDR at the end of the game, especially now due to the fact that games are ending much quicker. Now on to Masteries, where we found a few more large issues. It's very clear that Fenderman is aiming for an extreme passive late game build. He's playing it very safely and waiting until late game fights. In the Ferocity tree, he takes Bounty Hunter instead of Oppressor. This is okay for his build since he's aiming for no early game pressure and late game power, but it drops your poke during lane significantly. Bounty Hunter gives you 5% extra damage late game after you have killed everyone on the enemy team, which may never happen in rare occasions. It's a very inconsistent mastery. Oppressor, on the other hand, gives you up to 7.5% extra damage during your lane phase poke if you get a Q and 2 auto attacks off. Since your Q applies a slow, and your damage will then be amplified from that slow for the next 2 auto attacks. Oppressor is much better for us since we here at Drift King Azir's channel love to bully the lane phase and abuse min-maxing our stats. Fenderman goes down into the Cunning tree. While this mastery tree is very good for Azir, Fervor of Battle is currently much better since it applies with his soldiers and gives him a source of hybrid damage during the lane phase, which will boost your damage exponentially since most mid laners won't be taking any armor. Thunderlords is better during the late game once you get a lot of AP, but Fervor, once again, is better for the majority of the game. Now we'll take a look at the item build, and here we see the large diversity from what we build. You notice that his core build is Rod of Ages into Nashor's Tooth. There are a few issues with this build. The first issue is that Roa is simply an unneeded item. Once we hit late game, the only reason you would need that HP is if you fail to kite properly or assassins get on you. In the latter case, Zhonya's will usually suffice as a defensive item. We're wasting 400 gold on HP in this build. Next is the mana from Roa that we also don't need. With the recent buff of Doran's Ring, mana is no longer an issue for Nashor's build, making us waste another 350 gold on mana for a total of 750. We can drop Roa and the wasted gold and substitute it for Rylai's, sacrificing 100 HP and 20 AP for a massive constant slow and an instant stat boost instead of waiting for Roa to stack up. This makes our early and mid game exponentially more powerful. The fundamental flaw with Fenderman's build is that he created his build around the fact that Azir has a bad early game. The issue with this is that Azir doesn't have a bad early game, the build does. Fenderman is essentially tricking himself into believing that Azir has a weak early game power, when in reality, the playmaking potential of early game Azir is very strong and should be abused. That's it for this week. I wrote my own Azir guide over on Locking, so if you'd like to check it out, there will be a link in the description for you to see it. Let me know which build you prefer and discuss this video on the Reddit thread linked below. If you'd like to support me, you can check out my Patreon. Thanks again for watching and good luck, Emperors.